Today, the United States military continues to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran.
Did you know that a strip of water barely 21 miles wide at its narrowest could decide if gas prices skyrocket, superpowers go to war, and global trade grinds to a halt? What if we told you that's exactly what's happening right now in the Strait of Hormuz as U.S. and Iranian forces stare each other down at point-blank range? Well, we're about to explain all of this to you.
After an American fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone as it approached the U.S. aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea.
Did you know that in just the last few weeks, U.S. jets have shot down Iranian drones, Iranian gunboats have tried to seize a U.S.-linked tanker, and Iran has run live fire drills that temporarily closed one of the world's most important shipping lanes?
Most immediate impact was on the global oil price.
In fact, as of late February 2026, the U.S. has its biggest naval buildup in the region since the Iraq invasion in 2003, including the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln, while Iran's leadership is openly threatening to sink U.S. warships. So why is this tiny stretch of water so important? Why is the geography of the Strait of Hormuz uniquely dangerous? And how did decades of U.S.-Iran conflict bring us back to the brink again? Well, we're about to explain all of this to you. Today, we'll cover the basic geography of the Strait of Hormuz, what it looks like on a map, and why that matters, the current 2026 military tensions, what's actually happening incident by incident, and the deeper historical story, from coups to revolutions to tankers being blown up. Stay with me here, because once you see the map, a lot of today's headlines suddenly make sense. Before we dive in, I'm curious, if the Strait of Hormuz was fully blocked for a month, what do you think would be the first thing you'd feel in your own life? Gas prices, inflation, or something else entirely? Let me know down in the comments. I'll be reading through your answers after this goes live. Where exactly is the Strait of Hormuz? Starting with fact 1, the Strait of Hormuz is the choke point between the Persian Gulf and the open ocean. Geographically, to the north, Iran, to the south, Oman, specifically the Musandam Peninsula, an Omani exclave that sticks up into the strait, separated from the rest of Oman by the UAE. To the west, the wider Persian Gulf, where Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE all export oil. To the east, the Gulf of Oman, and then out into the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. In total, you're looking at a short, S-shaped funnel of water just tens of kilometers long that every major tanker from the Gulf must pass through to reach the rest of the world. For comparison, imagine if every ship leaving the U.S. East Coast had to squeeze through a channel the width of a small city, with hostile naval forces on both sides watching every move. That's essentially the Strait of Hormuz. Fact 2. At its narrowest, the Strait of Hormuz is about 21 miles, or roughly 33 kilometers across. Now, under international law, that's still wide enough for international shipping. But it's no coincidence that the actual usable lanes are much narrower than that. Typically, you have 2 shipping lanes, each about 2 miles wide, one inbound, one outbound, with a buffer zone in between. This means that almost all of the world's oil tankers are following the same narrow tracks day after day, within striking distance of shore-based missiles, small speedboats, naval mines, and drones. Turns out, this isn't just a random piece of ocean, it's a perfectly designed choke point. And the reason is quite strange. The land on both sides rises steeply from the coast, giving Iran especially good vantage points to monitor and, if it chooses, threaten ships below. Either way, if you're a Navy planner, the geography here is both a blessing and a nightmare. Easy to monitor traffic, almost impossible to protect everything if someone really wants to cause chaos.
Why the Strait of Hormuz matters so much. Starting with fact 3, the Strait of Hormuz is the most important oil choke point on Earth. In total, around a fifth of the world's crude oil trade and an enormous share of liquefied natural gas passes through this narrow passage. That means oil from Saudi Arabia's eastern fields, exports from Iraq and Kuwait, Qatar's massive natural gas shipments, and, of course, Iran's own oil when sanctions allow it. This means that whenever tensions flare there, you can practically watch global markets panic in real time. For comparison, when there are problems in the Suez Canal, ships can theoretically sail around Africa. It's slower and more expensive, but doable. When there are problems in Hormuz, there is no realistic alternate sea route for Gulf oil. You're either going through that strait or your oil isn't leaving by ship. Fact 4. The geography also creates a built-in power lever for Iran. Iran sits on the north side of the strait. With naval bases on its southern coast, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, is operating swarms of small, fast attack boats, coastal anti-ship missile batteries, and now drones and possibly hypersonic-capable missiles, according to Iranian claims. It's no coincidence that Iran has repeatedly said in various forms over the years, if we can't export our oil, no one will. The geography of Hormuz gives that threat teeth. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies have to keep the strait open to protect international shipping, to reassure Gulf allies like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, and to avoid a global economic shock. So, on one map, you have Iran leaning on geography to create leverage, the US leaning on its navy to neutralize that leverage. And that's the basic recipe for the tensions we're seeing in 2026. Speaking of 2026, what's happening right now? Fact 5. February 2026 has been one of the tensest months in the Strait of Hormuz in years. Let's walk through just a few key incidents. February 3rd, IRGC gunboats reportedly attempted to seize the US-linked tankers Dina Impero in or near the Strait of Hormuz. US naval forces intervened. Almost simultaneously, a US F-35 fighter shot down an Iranian drone near the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. It's not the first time we've seen this kind of dance, but the proximity of these events in such a narrow waterway is what worries people. Fact 6. Mid-February, Iran conducted live fire drills that temporarily closed parts of the Strait of Hormuz. Drills are technically legal if announced in advance, but here's the problem. When you fire missiles and artillery in a confined maritime choke point, while tensions with the world's biggest navy are already high and commercial tankers are trying to pass through, you create an environment where a single miscalculation could spiral. Either way, Iran used those drills to send a message. We can disrupt this waterway if we choose to. Fact 7. On February 17th, during nuclear talks in Geneva, Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei escalated the rhetoric further by threatening to sink US warships if pushed into a corner. In fact, he's used similar language before, but combined with the ongoing US carrier buildup, including the USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Abraham Lincoln, and the biggest US regional deployment since the 2003 Iraq invasion, it lands very differently. Then, as of February 19th, President Trump reportedly gave Iran a 10 to 15-day deadline for a new nuclear deal. So in the space of a few weeks, you have naval confrontations, drone shootdowns, live fire drills in the world's key oil choke point, explicit threats against aircraft carriers, and a ticking political deadline. Sometimes this panics people into a kind of freeze mode. They hear World War III and just shut down mentally. But geography helps us think more clearly. Because to understand why almost every clash seems to happen near Hormuz, we need to zoom out in time, not just in space.
The deeper roots, how U.S.-Iran relations broke down. Fact 8. The U.S.-Iran story doesn't start with nuclear centrifuges or gunboats. It starts with oil and a coup. Back in 1953, Iran's elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which later became BP. Britain was furious, and with U.S. support, helped orchestrated a coup that removed Mossadegh and strengthened the Shah, a pro-Western monarch. It's not because of some epic land or power struggle lost to history. It's because of a coup driven by oil interests and Cold War logic. This means that from Iran's perspective, foreign powers, especially the US and UK, interfered directly in their politics to control their resources.
Fast forward to 1979, the Iranian Revolution. The Shah is overthrown. An Islamic Republic is established under Ayatollah Khomeini. Protesters seize the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. 52 American diplomats and citizens are held hostage for 444 days. That's when U.S.-Iran relations essentially collapse. Fact 9. The 1980s brought the Iran-Iraq War, and with it, the tanker war phase in the Persian Gulf. Both Iran and Iraq started targeting each other's oil exports. The U.S., worried about global oil supplies and Gulf stability, began escorting Kuwaiti tankers through the Strait of Hormuz under the American flag.
This is when we get some of the most dramatic near Hormuz incidents. In 1987, the USS Stark was hit by an Iraqi missile. In 1988, the U.S. attacked Iranian naval targets in Operation Praying Mantis after an American ship struck an Iranian mine. And that same year, the U.S. Navy mistakenly shot down Iran Air Flight 655, a civilian airliner, killing 290 people after misidentifying it as a hostile aircraft. Regardless of who you think bore more blame, these events are burned into Iranian memory. So when you see Iran harassing tankers or threatening to close Hormuz today, it's not happening in a vacuum. From Tehran's viewpoint, the Gulf, and especially this strait, has been the arena where foreign powers have tried to control their fate for decades.
And from Washington's viewpoint, Hormuz is where U.S. forces have repeatedly been drawn into deadly clashes while trying to keep trade flowing. So why does this narrow strait keep coming up again and again? From nuclear deals to drone shootdowns, the modern era. Fact 10. Modern U.S.-Iran tensions are anchored around two things: nuclear ambitions and control of regional sea lanes. In the 2000s and early 2010s, Iran expanded its nuclear program. The U.S. and allies responded with severe economic sanctions. Iran developed asymmetric naval tactics in the Gulf and Strait, swarms of small boats, mines, and now drones.
Then came the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Iran agreed to limit and monitor its nuclear program. In exchange, many sanctions were eased. For a while, tensions cooled slightly. But in 2018, the U.S. withdrew from the deal and reimposed heavy sanctions. It's no coincidence that after that, we start seeing more frequent maritime incidents again. Tanker attacks and seizures near Hormuz in 2019, drone shootdowns on both sides, periods where Iran explicitly threatened to close the strait. It's not because Iran wants a hot war. It would likely lose militarily against the U.S. It's because, thanks to the geography of Hormuz, it doesn't need to win outright to inflict massive global pain. A few tankers attacked, a handful of mines, one miscalculation between a drone and a destroyer, and suddenly, insurance costs skyrocket, routes are delayed, and global markets slide. A trophy wanted by absolutely no one. What could happen next, and why? Geography will decide it.
So where does this go from here? Either way, geography sets the boundaries. Realistically, there are three broad paths. 1. De-escalation and a deal. Nuclear talks succeed, or at least are extended. Sanctions ease slightly. Both sides quietly pull back some forces. Hormuz stays tense but open, as it has for decades. 2. Prolonged standoff. No clear deal, but no full war. Constant low-level harassment, drone incidents, unsafe maneuvers at sea. Oil flows, but with a constant risk premium built in.
A serious crisis. A ship is hit, a carrier is damaged, or a missile strike miscalculates. One side feels it must respond.
Iran might try to seed mines, fire missiles, or threaten to fully close the strait. The U.S. and allies would then be forced into large-scale mine clearing and escort operations, or even strikes inside Iran to neutralize threats. Thanks to geography, any real closure attempt would instantly be a global crisis, not just a regional one.
And the reason is quite strange. One of the most volatile fault lines in international politics fits neatly inside your computer screen when you zoom in on this tiny pinch of water between Iran and Oman. Turns out, you don't need a world-spanning front line to risk a world-shaking conflict. You just need a narrow strait and two powers that can't afford to back down easily.
So why does the Strait of Hormuz dominate the headlines again in 2026? Because its geography funnels a huge chunk of the world's oil through a narrow, vulnerable corridor. Its coastline gives Iran leverage far beyond its raw military strength. And its history is packed with coups, revolutions, tanker wars, and near misses between the U.S. and Iran. This means that when you hear about a drone shot down near a U.S. carrier or a tanker seized in the dark, you're not just hearing random news. You're watching a decades-long, map-shaped struggle play out in real time.
Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the geography of Hormuz makes a future U.S.-Iran clash inevitable? Or can diplomacy and technology outgrow this choke point? Let me know in the comments, and feel free to challenge me or add details I missed. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on The Bigger Map.